2004, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment was deployed to Afghanistan. And prior to that deployment, obviously we made a lot of planning and a lot of preparation. We trained a lot, trying to make sure that overseas we succeeded in our mission as effectively and as successfully as possible, right? So we trained on pretty much everything we can train on, from driving Humvees at night to learning Farsi and Pashto, to getting kind of schooled up on medical procedures, right, in case of casualties. So the whole gamut of things, we just kind of hit it over and over and over again in anticipation for this deployment. And it was a good thing for us because, I mean, leave it to the Marines to make sure that we win wars. I'd been in country for about 2 months, and in that amount of time, we'd seen our share of violence and combat. And on this particular night, actually, I was up on EOP with 4 other Marines, and we'd been up there for about 7 days, and we were waiting for our relief sometime the next morning. But about 03 o'clock in the morning, we started getting rockets, incoming rockets and small arms fire throughout the entire AO. There was our firm base down below and our OP and 2 other OPs that were all taking some kind of fire, whether small arms or rockets. So from our vantage point, I could see where the rockets were coming from. And I could see that the rockets were coming from a village to our south. So it kind of puts us in this sort of predicament where the enemy's thinking, or their logic is, if we don't fire back because it's a village and we don't want to harm civilians, then they win. And if we do fire back because we want to eliminate the enemy, that we want to make sure that we're taking a fight to them, then there's the potential of collateral damage, which can turn the civilian populace against the U.S. forces. So they win. So it's a win-win for them when they fire from positions like that. And it's something that we, as Marines, didn't really want to deal with. But at the same time, we fell back on our training. I fell back on my training. And I just decided to make a call. I got on the horn, and I called in a fire mission on that target. Within 30 seconds, I had mortars pretty much aimed in and heading down range. Once I saw that the mortars were impacting where I wanted them, I went ahead and called fire for effect, which was to send the rest of their munitions down range. And from my MVGs that night, I could see that target just get decimated. And at about 4 o'clock in the morning, when the dust of battle kind of settled, it was quiet again, and I can hear these sort of faint screams and cries in the night. And I'll admit, though, it's probably louder now than it was that night, but the way I remembered anyway. I didn't think too much of it. I was 21 years old, a Marine. Marines like to get after it. They like to get some. And so we just kind of got ourselves amped up because we got ourselves in a little fight that night. Because of the events of that morning, our patrol, or our relief, patrolled up earlier than anticipated to come relieve us. So at about 4:30 or so, our relief came up, and we handed over the OP, and we patrolled on the way down to the firm base. We got to the firm base, and when we arrived, we had kind of an informal gathering by the front gate. Guys were excited. They were amped up. We started kind of patting ourselves on the back, giving each other high fives, so to speak, as far as for the fighting that we got into last night. And as we're kind of celebrating, and I'm getting pats on the back, I see that there's a group of people coming up to the front gate, and we weren't supposed to open that checkpoint up for another half hour or so. So as these people were coming up, I see that it's an old man and two women. And I can see that the old man is carrying something. And at first we're kind of cautious, obviously, but as we see them as we see them approach closer, I could see that they're not posing any sort of threat. And I could see that the bundle in this man's arms was a injured child. I can see the blood and debris on the child's face. So he approaches. He's talking. We have no interpreter at this time, so we don't really know what he's saying. He's kind of distraught. He hands me this kid, and I'm pretty much face to face with this child. And it could be that he was asking for help, seeing if we could do something for the child, but it felt like he was basically showing me what I had done. And it's a very tough thing to hold the consequences of your actions in your hands like that. And to this day, it's probably the heaviest thing I've ever had to carry. For as much as we prepared to go to Afghanistan, for as much as we prepared for battle, I had no idea how to deal with this. And I've been carrying that weight for just about 15 years. So I got out of the Marine Corps about a year and a half later, came home, and kind of bounced around. I struggled through, well, years and years of just sort of trying to figure things out. I didn't feel like I was a good person for what I'd done. I felt like there was no hope for me. I felt like I sort of became ineligible for salvation or for heaven, having grown up as a religious kid. So I kind of just thought it doesn't really matter what I do in this life. Nothing's going to erase what I've done. So my actions sort of reflected that. I made some bad choices in life that didn't reflect my actual values, just because I felt like there's really no point. And so I spent a lot of time doing that, and eventually I went and sought help, but it was kind of a different. I wasn't in the right mindset, I guess you could say. I showed up to the VA and said, "Fix me," and without me really wanting to do any of the work myself, I guess. I thought that they would just be able to either give me pills or do something, and I'd be fine. I knew I wanted to be okay. I just didn't know that it would take work on my behalf. So spent a lot of time kind of spinning my wheels, trying to get myself back on track, trying to find myself. And eventually, someone came along that believed in me, and they encouraged me to go and pursue my dream of being a firefighter, even though I kind of didn't really think that I would be ever deserving of something like that. So I got my foot in the door at my local fire department. I got on as a volunteer, and in one of my first calls, I remember I walked into this apartment, and there's this mother, and she's kind of frantic, and she's distraught as well, and she hands me her child. And she can't speak any English, so no one else really understood her. I spoke the language, but it's still kind of, I felt this sort of deja vu sort of feeling, right? In that it echoed that same scene from 10 years prior in Afghanistan when I'm being handed this child. The difference is that this time I could actually make a difference. I wasn't the agent of destruction. I wasn't the agent of death in this situation. I was somebody that can actually help and make a difference. So in that moment, I remember feeling like this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I was convinced that I mean, if I could do that for the rest of my life, then maybe I had there was some hope for me. So I kind of became obsessed with pursuing a job in the fire service. Obsessed in a negative way, right? In that I put life in general and even my family aside in trying to pursue this dream of mine. And I was so focused and so obsessed with it that as much as I heard, as much as you guys probably hear, family comes first, and you probably all practice it and believe it. In my mind, I sort of looked at it and thought, yeah, family comes first, but let me get this job, and then I'll focus on them. I got to get this job though, because I looked at it as my purpose, and I thought it was the fix. I thought that by being in the fire service and being around like-minded individuals that were mission-oriented, it would replace that camaraderie that I lost, when I got out of the Marine Corps. So I thought this is kind of replacing that, because there's this paramilitary organization, and we like to get after it, and that's what I need to be normal again. That's what I need to be okay. So I was avoiding. I continued to avoid, and I continued to not address the issue that I knew was bothering me, right? And so I just kept pursuing this job, and I kept making sure that I did everything I can to get that job. And I did. I got the job. But the problem with avoiding your demons, or avoiding the things that you know you need to address, is that they eventually kind of catch up to you, and they did. So I compiled the list of failures in a really short amount of time in those few years. I forfeited a job offer from my dream department. I was lucky enough to get another opportunity, and I got fired halfway through academy, and I lost my wife and kids in a divorce. So throughout all this, right, suicide kind of becomes this thought that kind of creeps into your head. And in this situation, it crept back in, and I thought, well, if I was ever going to do it, this is the time. I just lost everything. There's no point. And my belief that I'm not worthy of anything was just confirmed, because I just lost everything. So what else is there for me to do? And it was in that moment where I thought, if I do kill myself right now, if I decide to off myself, it basically proves them right? Who's them? Well, those people that probably looked at me and thought, hey, this Rangel guy, we gotta, he's a problem, he's a liability. And so I thought, if I do this, there's going to be people that when they hear about my death, they're going to be like, yeah, it's probably a good thing we didn't hire that guy. And I thought, well, fuck that. I'm not gonna go with that. So I put it away, and I haven't looked back since. But obviously, I'm still at the sort of rock bottom, right? And I have to kind of get myself up. And the beauty about rock bottom is that it makes a pretty strong foundation. So I started looking for resources. I realized I had to make a change in my plan going forward. I had to make a plan and start taking that action, right? So I realized that just like in the Marines, we make plans, and it's through execution that we find success. I decided I was going to make a resiliency plan, because the difference between just not giving up and being stubborn and being resilient well, there's a lot of space in between those two things. So I decided I want to learn how to be resilient, because I hadn't been, and I set out to do that. So in this, the last 2 years, I kind of submerged myself in that personal development. I went and I finally addressed the demon that I just got done telling you about. That story was something that I hadn't told anybody for over 13 years, and I just kept it inside. Today I'm telling 10,000 people, so it's a good thing. As much as bad as it was, and as much as nothing's ever going to change going forward, I could definitely learn to overcome it and become stronger in the end, right? So I tell you this story today not because I want any sympathy or any pity necessarily, or at all, really. I tell you this story because if you're going through something, and if there's something that's holding you back or weighing you down from your potential, because there's mountains that you are calling your name, right? Because they're meant for you to climb and conquer. And if there's something that's holding you back, address it. Don't wait years. Don't learn from me, right? Don't spend all this time going through that hell of self-sabotaging yourself and taking opportunities away from you, opportunities to not only succeed, but to be happy. I tell you this because sometimes there's somebody else that we might know that is inflicting damage to themselves, right? Because they don't feel like they're worthy, because they've gone through something or are going through something that makes them feel like there's no point for them. And so they'll take certain actions that we might not agree with, that may not line up with our values. And the wrong thing to do in that situation is to distance ourselves from them and make them feel like, well, like we don't want anything to do with them. I understand that sometimes we don't want to associate ourselves with people that don't have the same values as us, and I get that. But sometimes we need to recognize in that some people are just, their values don't line up with those things either. They're just in this mindset where they don't deserve anything, and they're doing these things as a form of self-sabotage. So if you're able to recognize that in somebody and give them hope and be encouraging and positive to them, it's gonna help them go a long way. And I tell you this today because there's a stigma that goes with PTSD and mental health altogether. And I know that the fire service is trying really hard to sort of eliminate that, and that's a great thing. But if we sit back and we wait for either an organization or for other people to destigmatize mental health issues or PTSD, we might be waiting a long time. The best thing we can do to destigmatize these issues is to destigmatize ourselves and take the actions that we need so that it no longer has the negative connotation that we might feel it has right now, or that others might perceive it as. Having those things does not make you any less a firefighter, any less a Marine, any less of a person. You can still go and do great things and overcome and be an asset to your department, to your family, to society, and you can be one of the stronger people because you've gone through something that maybe somebody else hasn't yet, or you just can help people be better prepared for things like that. Obviously, knowing how important it is to be prepared. Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity, and have a good evening.